To my right is John Bird, who is the editor-in-chief of the Jacksonville Business Journal. Next we have Sean Parks, Associate Media Director at St. John & Partners. We have Jason Mudd, who is the CEO of Axia Public Relations. Jim Dalton, President of the Dalton Agency. And Sharon Siegel-Cohen, who's Executive Producer for WJXT. So I'll pass the baton to John Bird, who's the moderator, and he can get things started.
Thank you very much, John. I guess we're here to talk about how the state of our business, and we have two related but different businesses up here today, communications and journalism, and how we see our businesses going. Both have been affected very much by both the internet and the recession that we've gone through and coming out of, and where we see ourselves going from here. So I'm going to start with Sharon at the end.
Okay.
You guys have 2 minutes to kind of give us the view from 10,000 feet, and we'll move on from there.
Okay, 2 minutes. We're now doing 8.5 hours of news a day, so 2 minutes is a little bit. When I started back at Channel 4 many years ago in '79, we were on manual typewriters. I just wanted to show you. I don't think most of the people in our newsroom really knows what a manual typewriter is. This is what the tapes look like. This was '85, big, bulky. Then this is what we shot on, really pretty much the last 10, 15 years, these little beta ones. Now, this is everything in an hour on these little sim-type cars, and then everything's computerized. So the nature of the business is evolving every day. Just a few months ago, we went to high definition. So each week there is something new, and there's some secret now in the works of possible more expansion, but they haven't officially announced that. The two words that we hear over and over in our business is social media. And I thought of an example yesterday. It used to be, if there was a big news event, you turn it on at 6 p.m. or probably 5 p.m. Well, here's what happened yesterday. We heard at about 10:45 that on Sunday, the Hart Bridge would only be going in one direction in the morning to the stadium, to Everbank, and then in the afternoon. We thought they were going to do it the other way, but it turns out it was going to be back to normal after the game. We decided that's a big story. We're going to get that on as our lead at noon. Okay, you didn't have to wait for noon. Within instance, once we had it confirmed, it's now on Twitter, it's now on Facebook, it's now on the internet, and then we led with it at noon. By 5 o'clock, there was a news conference, and it confirmed, and we got reaction, but everything is instant. So the days of waiting for Walter Cronkite, which is probably more of your grandparents' idea of news, is just not anymore. It's all instant, and if it's not on TV, then somebody's going to send a picture or a video, and we'll get that out too. So you don't have to wait around, but the whole social media has really kind of changed the nature of what we do, that nobody is going to wait for their news. If they don't see it on Channel 4 in some form, they know it's out there somewhere else. So
Time's up.
that's it. 2 minutes, I did good. All right, thank you.
I'm Jim Dalton, and own an advertising agency here, so I wanted to quickly touch on some media changes. And I took notes because 2 minutes is really tough for me, and I'll forget half of them. But I think it'd be easy to talk about the shift into digital and social. It's been going on for the last 5 to 8 years. Traditional dollars are moving that way. What I was going to focus on a little bit more for the 2 minutes is what we talk about in our agency is multi-screen. And multi-screen is television screen, computer screen, tablet, phone. Today, those four vehicles, with obviously the traditional media is still very important to us, but we know that consumers can look at their media on any one of those four, and they can look at their music, they can look at movies, TV shows, get their news, get their web on any one of the four. So it really changes the way that we look at media and how we buy and plan media. For example, I think if you look at our client base, there's not one client that's that we're buying media for the same as we did a year ago, and literally a month ago. I mean, we're having to constantly look at our plans and adjust them because of the changes in media and how you all and we all consume media. So that was one point that I really wanted to make as far as change. We really look at consumer behavior a lot more than we used to because we have these vehicles and we want to understand who our target markets are and how to reach them and how they're consuming that media. But I think when I look at the future, see right now, and you guys have all studied this, we buy on all these formulas, gross rating points, we look at circulation, we look at viewership and all those things. I really think that the future of media from our perspective is about impressions. And you look at social media and all that. We're going to look at, once we identify who we're trying to reach, their habits, how they consume media, we're going to figure out how many impressions we want, and we're going to buy those impressions across those channels.
Next.
Wow. I had 2 more points. That's why I wrote it down.
We got an hour.
Okay.
Good morning, I'm Jason Mudd. My company's Axia Public Relations. I started over 11 years ago. And I think the difference in our firm among the panelists is we just do public relations. So we're, our colleagues here really focus on advertising. And so, as Jim mentioned, social media has changed our business, especially tactically, but strategy, it's still the same, concept, which is helping our clients build their brand and reputation. And, I remember, back in 1998, sitting around a table talking about the internet and how powerful it was and where we see it going. And we called it Internet 2.0. Now people call it Web 2.0. But the idea was it is going to be more collaborative. And it's really come to be exactly what we really thought it would be. And, I think a lot of times students will talk to us and say, man, the world has just changed. And I really feel like the world hasn't changed. It's just gotten more connected. So meaning that you still have the same strategy and you still need the same skill sets when you go through school. You just have more tools to do it and more tools to do it directly with the audience you're trying to reach. And I think good PR people have always tried to do that, tried to connect directly. I think good advertising people have tried to reach directly to the consumers. Now you just have a lot more tools to do it. And as Sharon mentioned, you got to be able to do it really quick. And so it's a different environment for sure as far as the expediency and the competition. And as Jim and I were talking beforehand, people who can't adjust, just don't succeed anymore. And so not only do you have to have great writing skills and understand the difference between a strategy and a tactic while you're in college, but you also have to be even more ambitious than before. And I think you have to know how to use a lot more tools than you did before. One issue I think is a lot of students are trying to be generalists, and I think the marketplace is looking for people who are experts. And so the quicker you can figure out what you want to do and become an expert, the more valuable I think you'll be in the marketplace. It's hard. I didn't know what I wanted to focus on when I was in school, but you figure it out.
Sean, you're up.
Okay. My name is Sean Parks, the Associate Media Director at St. John & Partners. I've been in media planning for about 17 years, working at agencies from California to New York to Atlanta and here in Jacksonville. So a big part of my job is to really get a good feel for the media landscape and understand how media consumption patterns are changing and evolving. And as these guys have pointed out, they certainly are changing, and they're changing very rapidly. When you look at how people are spending their typical day, they now estimate that approximately 12 hours are spent per day consuming the major media, and that continues to rise. A lot of that, again, though, to be fair, is driven by multitasking. You may be watching TV at the same time, you're on your tablet, et cetera. But it's pretty substantial that is just continuing to present more opportunities from a media perspective. 2013 marks some pretty significant milestones, too, from just media consumption patterns. 2013 is actually the first time that time spent on digital media has actually surpassed television. And it's also projected to be even further along the digital route is that time spent on mobile devices actually expected or projected this year to surpass desktop, time spent on desktop, consuming media on desktop. So some pretty dramatic shifts there. A lot of that driving the digital change is smartphone penetration is now over 62%. So it's such readily available information at your fingertips. So it presents challenges for media people, but also a lot of opportunities in terms of having that instant access. People can research pricing, people can get feedback from their social peers, et cetera, in terms of evaluating products, which products to buy, which locations to visit. Tablets are also rapidly advancing. It's just the adoption rate for tablets has hit about 26 to 30%, I think, from some estimates at this point. And it's only taken about 3 years to hit that point, when it took about 10 years for smartphone, the same adoption rates to occur. So,
Okay. Being the moderator, I get to talk for 5 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. This question came up yesterday. I was at Marshall Ladendorf's class, and we talked a lot about this. Like Sharon, I started in 1979. I was typing on an IBM Selectric, my first stories as a professional. There's been a ton of change, and much of it in the last 5 years, as everyone on the panel acknowledges. Let me talk about the things that have stayed the same in journalism, and that is, the best journalists still feel like they are mission driven. They have a real passion for finding the news and telling the news as accurately and now as quickly as they can. They feel they are providing a public service, and all of those, all that mission has to be now fit into what we find is an environment that changes probably every month, and that presents a lot of challenges, and it's pretty much the same challenges that you've heard from these guys. But print is not dead. Print isn't. Newspapers are not dead. We are evolving. We're changing. There may not be ink on paper delivered to your doorstep 10 or 15 years from now, but there'll certainly be newsrooms with people doing what print journalists do right now. So that's it for me. We've got two different. We've got two related but different industries here. Why don't we talk a little bit about how the relationship between public relations and advertising and the media, how we relate to each other, how that is changing. That might be of interest to the students and the faculty here. Anybody want to jump in on that?
I would just jump in and say that I'm seeing newsrooms. In our line of work, we work exclusively with newsrooms. We don't talk to the business side or the advertising side. But we're seeing where journalists now better understand where their paycheck comes from, right? They understand that ad dollars drive, their income and their job security. And so what we're finding is that when we can bring a client or a topic that's going to generate a lot of page views and a lot of comments, that the reporter's smart enough to say, you know what, this is probably a higher priority story than my own personal agenda and interest. And I would say before the recession, early in the recession, we were dealing with a lot of journalists who were just saying, you know what, I don't want to cover that because that doesn't really interest me. And that's not journalism in my mind. That's just me picking the stories I want to do. So I've seen this movement back towards understanding that, in journalism, your job is to communicate to your audience and your public and what interests them. And so, I've been interacted with, say, a beat writer who covers retail and banking, and they ignore banking because retail is more interesting to them, right? But you really have to cover what your audience is looking for.
Right.
And so I think what's happened is there's this idea of, okay, money making for my corporation isn't bad, and I can do that by being a good reporter.
Right.
And by driving stories of interest, but also getting that. I think years ago there was this idea of let's break this news before everybody else does so that I look good and my news outlet looks good. And I think it's now more accepted to say, let's break this news so that we drive more traffic and then our ratings are up, or our our business side of the house is very happy. And of course, our advertisers become happy.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. Mm-hmm. There is a lot more recognition in the newsroom, and if you'd have to be kind of deaf, dumb, and blind not to. I heard a statistic the other day that there's half as many journalists in the state of Florida as there were in 2005. I've seen a lot of people have to leave. A lot of my colleagues have had to leave, not because they couldn't hack it, but because the business changed and the economics of the business changed. So I think you're right about that. Anybody else want to chime in?
On the advertising side, I think it's quite different. In advertising, there used to be somewhat of an adversarial relationship with the media. How low can we get the rates down because it's still a negotiated rate? It's one of the few things that's still bartered. I think that's changed dramatically. We've really had to look at the media as our partners, and they're coming to us with information, as you guys have both mentioned, with the changes in technology. We have to understand how we can use those products that you have besides just television or print, your internet, your websites. So we've had to have a much more partnership-based relationship and much more promotional than in the past, where we were just buying time, buying space. And that's the biggest change I've seen in advertising and media.
Could you talk a little bit more about promotional? What do you mean by that?
Added value. I don't think I have one client who doesn't insist on an enormous amount of added value to their buy. So if we're just buying a page in your publication or a spot on TV, they want more than that. They want to be mentioned in a promotion leading into the weather, or they want to build a promotion around that ad for a certain time of year or something like. I mean, they're just always asking us to come up with ways to get more out of the buy than just putting the dollars in and buying the space or buying the time.
So your clients are a little savvier than they used to be.
Yes.
Savvier and demanding for their dollars.
Yeah,
right?
and they know there's more opportunity than there used to be. It was really easy to buy a page. You knew what it cost. Now with your websites and the other vehicles that you have, we need to be more creative on the
Right.
media side.
Sure.
In the news business, we are really separate from the advertising or the salespeople upstairs. I would say most of the producers have never met any of the salespeople, so we're just separate. We don't know clients versus, we're just looking for news and stories. And a lot of times we get these wonderful pitches from public relations people. For instance, a Jaguars player is going to visit some child who's sick in the hospital, and you go, oh, that sounds good. That's at 11 a.m. And then the PR person will call, hey, do you think you're going to be able to go to the hospital to see? Well, we're planning on it. And then here's what happens. The Matthews Bridge gets struck by a ship, or the airport gets closed because it's possible a guy has a bomb. So
Right.
we have really good plans, and we do try to do positive stories, but the news gets in the way, and that's always going to be our priority. So the PR people who don't understand, well, we had a good story and we thought you were going to come by, we would have, but there are other things going on now. So that's really how it works in the news department.
I don't think that is how it works in our news department anymore. We do have relationships with our ad salespeople. I meet with them at least once a week to talk about how the sales are going for certain sections that we're publishing, so that I know, how much content I'm going to need to make that section work. They're telling me how the ad sales are going, obviously, and who's buying. That doesn't affect, how I assign a story or how a story is written. I don't want to give that impression, but we are a lot more cognizant than we used to be of the advertising folks and what they're doing. There still is that wall there, but it's a lower wall than it used to be. We used to have no contact, and historically that was true of broadcast and print newsrooms, that there would be no contact really between advertising and the newsroom for obvious reasons. You don't want to at all be associated with something where the coverage is being swayed by the advertising. That's really a cardinal sin, and still is. But we have found ways to work together, and we found ways to do promotions together. We found ways, to be a little more business savvy without compromising those ethical concerns. I'm gonna throw it open to you guys in just a minute, but I wanted to I wanted to ask, and maybe this is just a question primarily for Jim, but you guys, if you want to jump in. I've been hearing a lot about advertising being auctioned on the internet, and I don't know, I don't know a lot of depth about it, but if you guys have any experience with that or could educate us on that.
Yeah, so I can take the first round here. Basically, there's in terms of digital advertising, I'll speak for digital.
Mm-hmm.
There certainly is. There's something called real-time bidding, RTB, and typically, when you go out and place a banner ad or a digital buy with a site, you can go directly to the site. There's also options where you can go to a network that specializes in broad-reaching across thousands of sites, where you can buy based on certain demographic targets, based on different attributes. You can target really, really finely just based on those specific attributes that you're looking for in your target audience. What has evolved is also this kind of what's called demand-side platform, and it's real-time bidding, where people are going in when you make an order to these firms. They're actually going in and bidding on that inventory at that point. So it's kind of a dynamic cost CPM. So they're projecting that I think almost 20 to 30% now of all digital display advertising is through real-time bidding. And I've seen numbers, projections that could be 50% very, very soon in the next year or so. So it's a way to just drive efficiencies. Certainly, as these guys talked about, is ultimately our job is to invest the client's dollars in the most efficient and effective ways possible. And they're certainly looking for those channels that will deliver the strongest ROI. And so you're constantly kind of exploring those different opportunities. But I think that is probably what they were referring to in terms of the auction media, in terms of there's also a lot of discussion about that eventually you'll be able to do that model based on across all channels, whether it's television, things like that. So it definitely presents some interesting opportunities going forward.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, I think I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it commoditizes the media. Unfortunately, that's the way it's going, because you're getting squeezed on budgets. So if you can bid and get the media that you were going to purchase anyway for a lower price, then certainly the customer or the client's going to be happy. I think that's more in larger buys, where you have discretionary dollars, and dollars, not discretionary, but enough dollars that you can go out and have the time and do that. But it's certainly become a part of what things that we have to look at.
Is it, are we a little bit shielded from it in our market because we're not a big market, we're not a major market, or is it, are you seeing it?
Our media is packaged in like any other market. When you're looking at a regional buy or a national buy, and our market's one of them, then they'll buy inventory and put it into that package. At least that's what I've seen.
We utilize some of the real-time bidding. It is certainly there are different objectives for each client, but you can partner with these firms that specialize in the real-time bidding, and you tell them the type of inventory that you want. If you want on sports-oriented sites or news-oriented sites, target adults 18 to 49, and then they go out and bid on that inventory that meets that criteria. And so. You certainly, it commoditizes it in a way, but certainly, there's still, you have some parameters that you can work with in terms of when you're making those purchases.
And I would think for newspapers and television stations, it pretty much boils down to lower rates for advertising, lower revenue.
From our experience in the projects that we're working now has been primarily from a digital perspective in terms of banner ads and things like that.
Okay.
Maybe not lower revenue, but definitely lower margin. Because it's bringing in a new revenue channel, income they might not have received for open inventory.
Right.
Yeah, in digital, it's where there's unsold in a lot. Not all the time, but
Gotcha.
I think part of the reason is in broadcast and print, a lot of it is sold. So, not that you wouldn't add 4 more pages if you can sell it, right?
Okay, what do you guys think? Any questions you want to ask these guys? Yes, sir.
Question is about social media and the internet, and especially how it pertains to broadcasting. So a lot of people talk about the immediate impact and getting the news out there as quickly as possible, but another attitude that I've noticed is that the information will stay out there, whereas a broadcast is over, and if you've missed it, you've missed it. So can you talk a little bit about how people don't necessarily need to see the broadcast immediately when they can just go online later and check out what they've missed?
It's kind of true. I mean, I guess if you want the urgent, the airport shut down now. So that was, that night a few weeks ago, we were on the air from, I think, we've got it confirmed, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30. So if you're at home, yeah, you want to see it. If you're not at home, it would be online on the web. And you can see it streaming, so the web is sort of an integral part of what we do. So pretty much during a newscast, if you're at home on your laptop, you could watch the news from home. So there is immediacy. It's all kind of together now.
And does that affect viewership? Will it, in the future, do you think it will decrease the amount of people who are watching live on their TVs?
That's a good question. I don't know how they're going to determine. I mean, the ratings are now determined every day. Gary Corbett over here was the research director for many years. We get what's called the ratings, that it shows every 15 minutes our viewership. I'll turn it to you because that was your specialty. How will the internet compare to our ratings?
The challenge is to be able to measure these screens, these 4 screens, and Nielsen and the various vendors are coming up with systems and software to do that. I mean, it's a lot of times though you're merging different databases together to come up with figures and estimates, but it's a work in progress. It really is.
They'll end up getting credit for that if you watch it eventually in the rating systems. Right now, no, but ultimately, that's why they're all building out that infrastructure.
And they did some research that most people are watching their TV and on either their smartphones or their laptops or whatever, their iPads together. And that's real common too. But again, I don't think they've got it all measured, but I'm sure they will.
2 things for that. One, I flew back from LA on Sunday night speaking at a conference, and I wanted to watch Walking Dead. And they didn't have it in flight, but they had internet. So I just logged into one of our servers at the office, and I watched it on a 30-second delay, And that's something, you couldn't even dream about 5 years ago. So I watched Walking Dead on the flight from LA, and I was very excited about that, right? The second thing I would say is, 5 or 10 years ago, we might get a nice article about a client in a newspaper or a magazine, but it wouldn't appear online. And we were actually, we prefer that than having something just be online only. Where now, we've shifted our thoughts on that because there's more people looking online. And as you said, which is really unique, I think, to public relations, is you buy an ad today and it's gone when the next broadcast happens or when the next magazine rolls out. But if you have a story about your company or your product, it's going to be on Google for maybe forever. But I guarantee you probably at least 10 years. And that's true with some video. Some TV stations will keep news stories up there, but just the other day I went back to find a TV story that was on a local TV station 3 or 4 years ago, and it's long gone now because of the data capacity, but that'll go away too. Some of that turns into liability, meaning if you keep a story live long enough, you have some, ownership responsibilities to it. But that's just, it's just different. Whereas before it was, make sure it's in print, where now it's like, make sure it's also online, or, can you get it online first? So.
And we, at the Business Journal, we're in the process of transforming to a business model where we put everything online first. We don't break stories in our paper anymore. What we use the paper for is telling people the more in-depth why something happened, the perspective on why it happened, maybe some insider information if we can get it, some historical perspective on why the port hasn't been quite as successful as people. Kind of the sit back and read type of perspective, whereas the internet is very, and social media is very, what happened 5 seconds ago. I don't need to know the background. Just Tell me what happened. Ship hit the bridge, the airport's closed, whatever. CSX had a great quarter, CSX had a lousy quarter, whatever. So, when we were talking to Marcia's class yesterday, it kind of hit me. The buzzword 10 years ago in media was convergence, and it was like, oh my God, don't say that word ever again, because it was just so overused, and so. But it turns out it's probably a pretty good word, because I think in another few years, TV stations are going to be, and TV station newsrooms and print newsrooms will operate very similarly. Our people are starting to shoot video, and Marcia was telling me that in TV newsrooms, suddenly the reporters have to learn how to write in a newspapery style, because formerly they've been trained to write for the ear, for broadcast. Now they have to write stories that go on the internet. That has to be in a more of a newspaper style. So we are converging. And if anybody can come up with a better word or a new word, I'd be really happy to hear it, because I'm so tired of that word, but it's true. Any other questions?
I have one. It's going to end.
You need, I'm sorry. You need
I need the. I just have a question about advertising and print together. Where do you think that augmented reality is going to come in, or if that's even a thing that you see as going anywhere?
I'm not familiar with augmented reality.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
We don't want to use jargon.
It's the new layering of social media and apps and the embedding of that into print media.
Storify, is that what you're talking about?
It's layer. It's, you know what I'm talking about. Augmented reality. The augmented reality.
Yeah, it's more of how would you describe it? How would you describe it?
It's kind of like QR code reading, where it takes you somewhere, except this would be scanning a page of print and having multiple media sources available to you, as far as videos immediately available using smartphones.
Clicking on certain links?
Not really clicking on it, just automatically will pop up with a video.
I mean, another example of augmented reality is if using the cell phone, if you're going walking downtown Jacksonville, you'd be able to, on your cell phone, see things like there's an app out there, how many internships are available in this building, or all of a sudden would come up some historical context of the building. So it's augmented versions of what's around you.
There's some discussions about that in relation to print, but also outdoor. There's a near-field communications from a mobile standpoint. There are a lot of devices where you can see that, I think airports have on their security trays, you can actually lay your cell phone on there, and it automatically can communicate a message to your phone, specific advertising messages and things like that. Certainly that's something it's evolving in terms of personalized messages based on exactly where you are. I think, from a mobile standpoint, it's much easier in terms of we do campaigns, targeted based on, GPS coordinates, so you're able to deliver banner ads on mobile devices based on where they are in relation to, could be specific restaurants or particular sports stadiums, or an entire city if you want to hit them all at a specific time. So I think there's a lot of opportunities around that front, specifically as it relates to print. I can't recall any specific examples of that recently.
I think you call it augmented reality maybe in the academic world. We have other ways of referring to it, but it's really not evolved much in the U.S., but you see it in other countries, other continents. Asia and Europe are much further advanced in that. And but I can also use my cell phone to pay for many things, in Asia and even in parts of Europe. In the United States, there's just not the support for it yet, or the collaboration among people who want to protect their their property. But it's moving there in a big way. And I'm not an advertising expert. I'm just a consumer in the marketplace that likes to look at technology and has technology clients. So I think we're headed there. I think that we're slow to adopt it for some reason in this country. Well, for known reasons. But yeah, I mean, it's just like when your phone pops up and tells you one of your friends is nearby. That's cool and different. But in other countries, they're a lot further along with it, and we'll get there. We'll buy. Google will buy a company that can innovate, and they'll integrate it into what they're doing.
Oh, joy. Well, I guess I've got to do some reading when I get out of here and see, learn more about augmented reality. Thank you for that. Yes.
With public relations, sorry. With public relations, more so for the three guys. Your traditional and current way of getting your brand out there, getting your message for an event, or just news out there to the media would be press releases, media advisories, and then social media as a partner to it. But as social media grows and becomes a more dominant source for news for upcoming generations like millennials and Gen X, how do you project that's going to affect the relationship between the media, like WJXT, and public relations agencies? Do you think you'll still be partnering together to get your information out there, or do you think it'll just be primarily news and then you'll focus more on? Does that make sense?
I would look at it two ways. One, our clients through social media are now more easily able to create more instant communications directly with their consumers or their target consumers. So, the media has always been, and the PR professional's idea, the media has always been an audience and a tool. And that's not a put down, right? A tool is in a communications channel to communicate with. But, really now you can almost in many ways circumvent the media and just have that direct communication line. That doesn't mean that you want to do that, but there's a way you can do that. So, one of our clients we represent likes to position themselves as non-corporate as a company could possibly be. And so they kind of like to call themselves rebels with a cause, or renegades in many ways. And so, their social media channels are ridiculous. I mean, millions of followers. And so we will often break news on their Twitter feed or on Facebook, and then we send it out to the media, and the media still covers it because it's a company of significance as far as, their size and their growth and their tech innovation. So, we're constantly playing around with that. So, for example, we've got a client who interviewed with, Inc. and Forbes this week, and those contacts and that pitch came through literally a 140 character or less pitch through Twitter versus trying to get this person on the phone or by email, because that's what everybody else is doing, and because they're following us and we're following them, we can kind of engage them in a different way and really just tease them with the story. If we can capture a good pitch in 140 characters, which is not easy to do, it's probably a pretty good story. If it can be dumbed down into a compelling and interesting, where, say the editor of Inc. magazine replies back and says, "Tell me more." That's a good thing to be and a good place to be. So we use social media. You have to be careful because a lot of people are sensitive that, Facebook is off limits. But for example, our team locally will work with some people at Channel 4 who we can get to them through Facebook a lot easier than we can their corporate email or their cell phone or whatever. They'll even message us back, I hope Sharon doesn't mind, during a broadcast, and they're not going to answer their cell phone during a broadcast, but they'll respond to a text message or more likely a Facebook thing. So we have a client coming in who's a personality, and he'll be in Jacksonville for the Georgia-Florida game, and we've booked exclusively almost all those interviews via social media. Quick back and forth. He's coming, here's his availability, and they say, we want him morning show this time, and it's done. And, my young folks love it that way. A lot of young people, I feel like, are afraid to pick up the phone and do business. I still feel like business gets done by phone. Real business gets done by phone. Little things can be done, through social media and email. But that's kind of how I see things moving. I hope that answered your question.
I'm going to add, for public relations people, there are sometimes some opportunities out there that if someone's paying attention, if you had a client, let's say that's a hospital, for instance, let's say Angelina Jolie, you hear that she had a double mastectomy as a preventative thing, and that news comes out on a Tuesday night. we're calling the different hospitals and doctors saying, hey, do you have, an oncologist or a doctor who could come on the morning show at 7 a.m. because we know the Today Show or the networks will be all over it. We're calling them. If someone was savvy and went, ooh, gosh, I bet the local TV stations and all of them would want a guest. That doesn't happen. Or the night that, it was last Friday, a huge verdict in this internet cafe scandal.
Right.
The local former president of the Jacksonville Bar is indicted on 103 counts. Again, 6:30 p.m., we're calling all our lawyers, hey, can you get somebody on tonight at 10 or on the morning show? These PR people, if anybody had been paying attention, you would have gotten your client on a show. So it seems like that doesn't happen, that everybody's going to bed, and you may pitch something at the zoo or a charitable walk, but any of the things that we could use, and if you were kind of following the news, and you may not have clients that are hospitals or doctors, but some people do, that you would be ahead of the game, or know that on Christmas, any of your clients would get on a show. But
I'm wondering to the extent that's true, if it's kind of a result of how fractured we all are these days, where we're doing our Twitter, we're doing our Facebook, we're trying to put out a newspaper or a broadcast, and there's our plate is segmented and very full, and I'm not sure there's a lot of time anymore for kind of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture and thinking about strategy.
But it's interesting, all the hospitals, St. Vincent's Memorial, UF Health, not Baptist, all their PR people are former reporters and TV.
Sure.
So they know what the news is. That's kind of interesting. So a lot of times they're halfway paying attention, but it is funny that when you retire out of TV, what do? Go into PR.
It's true.
Yes.
I want to address this to you as potential hiring agents in the communities for both our graduates and our interns. With the changes to the media, and especially the increasing emphasis on digital and mobile media, what kinds of skills and knowledge would you like to see in our students here?
I think one of the biggest areas of weakness is social media strategy. We talk a lot about social media and in a very basic sense of posting and community management, and those are givens. Understanding social media strategy is important to our clients. We have 5 full-time in our social media department, and 3 or 4 of the 5 are very savvy. We have several research tools that they use to develop those strategies, but it's easy to find somebody that can post content, and everyone's pretty qualified to do that coming out of college. It's the strategy side, and social media at one point was success was judged by how many followers. It's not anymore. It's engagement. I mean, you can have 1 million followers, but if only 1,000 of them are engaging, it's not doing you any good. But if it's somebody new to social media, then the strategy still has to be about building followers first, because you're not going to get engagement without them. So that 2-pronged strategy is important. Do you know how to build followers? Do you get the right followers so that once you have them, there is engagement? I think it's probably the weakness that I've seen the most in graduates from a social media perspective.
I want to agree with Jim, but I want to back it up a little bit and say, I think overall to the professors in the room, I mean, if you could just make sure your students know what a strategy is, that would save us a ton of time as employers. I'm going to hire a candidate who understands the difference between, as I said earlier, a goal and an objective, and a strategy and a tactic. And I didn't know that in college, but I found out later. And I think if you could fundamentally teach that, I think there's a lot of emphasis, whether it's at UNF or otherwise, and use this tool, learn this tactic, learn how to use this software, learn how to use this this social media channel, instead of really starting from the beginning and saying, you need to know who you want to talk to and why, and what you want to say to them, and what's going to be interesting to them. So, with Gary, I mean, it's a little bit of research, just understanding how to put together a plan would be a big step in that right direction. I was on a committee for FSCJ when they were going to roll out a PR program. And so many of the practitioners that were there from marketing and PR and advertising were so focused on telling FSCJ that we need tacticians that can do so. We don't know how to do social media, so teach them how to do it so someone can do it. And I was like, no. As I said earlier, the business hasn't changed. It's just become more competitive and more collaborative. And I think you have to be smarter to survive. And part of that being smarter is being more strategic. So whether it's social media, PR, advertising, marketing, whatever it is you're going to do, even journalism, you have to really understand who's my audience and why am I doing this, and constantly ask yourself why. The other thing I'd like to see students do is just be better writers. I mean, you can never, ever be, too good of a writer. You can have analysis paralysis, and you can be part of the red pen police that just proofreads everything and doesn't really produce anything. But I think better writing skills. So those are the two things I want out of graduates. And then the other thing you just can't teach is ambition, passion, hunger, and eagerness to learn. Everybody will get hungry eventually, but I like people who are just naturally hungry and, who have a passion for what they do.
Well, one other thing I would add is I think it would be worth talking to several of the local larger agencies to know what research tools they use, in media, what we use in social media. They're not expensive, some of them, especially for a college. If a student came in that already understood how to use some of the tools that we have in social media that do our reporting, it'd be a huge advantage over any other applicant.
I'd just like to go back, pinging off what Jason said. I kind of feel sorry for the folks in college now because there's so much stuff being thrown at them, and now we have alternative reality or whatever the heck. And it must be incredibly difficult for them to really strategize their own careers and what's important. The social media and the digital skills are, without question, they're vital right now. But the ability to write is as important as it ever was. The ability to communicate clearly, the ability to take a very complex subject, and they all seem to be complex these days, and put it present it in a way that people who are unfamiliar with that subject will readily understand. Those are skills that are still golden and very much fundamental to a journalist or somebody in public relations coming out of school.
I'll add on to that. For the buzzword now in newsrooms around the country is mobile journalists, which was not around when I was in school. And that's the ability, they call them the one-man bands. You have to be able to write, edit, shoot your own video, and be on the air. And the ones that we're hiring out of college, they're doing that. And even a friend of mine at the network, he said that's what they're doing too. So the days of you're a reporter, you're a photographer, you're an editor, you're a producer, it's all one thing together. And again, that's a lot more skills that these college students are going to need. I just hope the schools are addressing what are the needs out there for these if they want to pursue TV. The other thing for the colleges, and I don't know how this is working, and I told Gary that, see what the jobs are, because I keep hearing these students who are majoring in like a sports degree, and I hope nobody here is doing that. I would ask the TV stations, how's your sports department? Because a lot of them are eliminating some positions there. Somebody said in one of the big TV stations in Orlando, hey Rob, they only have 2 sport people in the sports department. So if the colleges just need to, what are the needs out there? Because if it's not in the sports department, then why are you adding that to your curriculum? What are the jobs? And maybe that's not the priority, but I think that should be, if it is TV, do they need producers? Yes. Do they need reporters? Kind of. Anchors? Not really. So just make sure as the students are going into the majors, they're realistic about the job market out there.
I think, if I may just interject, that I knew coming in, and we're already seeing it, there's a theme, an ongoing theme, I think, of being smarter, being more intentional, and being integrated while having engagement with your audience. The idea of kind of mobile journalism, reminded me that, I didn't turn on my office computer until yesterday, mostly because I had been traveling, but I just depend on my smartphone so much. And, you talked about mobile journalism. I mean, I announced to our company that we were, launching a new initiative. And at the same time, I also announced that we're, upgrading our benefits program. And I did that from my smartphone, and so I recorded a video and we pushed it out. Part of that's because we have people in different markets that work for our company. Part of it was, the deal was done, and when it was done, I wanted to announce it, and the best way to do that was to make sure it was said the way I wanted it said instead of through the grapevine. So I just recorded a video, whether I was in an airport or stepping out of a conference or whatever it might be. So Thursday, I turned on my laptop and I saw what I was working on it, I guess on the plane on Sunday for the very first time, because I can do so much of what I need to do on my phone. And I think that's going to become more the norm. And we're already seeing that where, solopreneurs can be one-person entrepreneurs and as Jim and I were talking earlier, outsource, all over the place and have virtual employees. I mean, there are people who work for my company I've never met. And in fact, on the way here, we were looking for a temp to fill in for one of them. And the temp just said, "Does this person work in your office?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Well, where does she work?" And I said, "I think Wisconsin," but I don't know where for sure. I know when I hired her, she worked in Chicago. And then she said, "Can I work from home? My husband's being relocated." And I'm like, it got floated up to me. I'm like, of course, she's great, And, I think about, she's worked for us for about 2 or 3 years. And I think a week or two ago, Google popped up her photo with an email from her, you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, that's what she looks like, I mean, I've seen her on our website, photo, but, it was more of a personal photo. So it was interesting to me to have that experience. And, it's amazing. She's a copy editor, so nobody needs to see her, to have her do what she does well. But she's the best copy editor I know, which is why we hire her wherever she might be.
Interesting. Well, we scared you now?
I want to talk about money. You were talking about revenue, and you said that the majority of your revenue for the Jacksonville Business Journal comes still from print advertising, and then it's followed by digital. And I've heard people talk about, we're talking about how do we monetize this, and you predicted that in a few more years that you felt that your revenue would be equally print and digital. Right now, the cost of digital advertising is very, very low. So is he right? Is somebody going to figure out that it's more valuable to advertise digitally than, and when will that happen?
There actually are, in fact, magazines now that the majority of their advertising revenue comes from their digital extensions. I think we've talked a lot about digital and television changes there, but we're seeing a lot of tremendous changes across all channels, media channels. We talk about radio. The number one ranked radio station in Jacksonville is now Pandora. Arbitron, which measures ratings for radio, now measures Pandora. So it's actually showing Pandora as the number one rank. So in terms of the audience, there are shifts going on. Outdoor, certainly there's a shift to digital signage and things like that. There's talk of where actual billboards can recognize who is traveling by. Is it a male? Is it a female? What kind of age? And can send a customized message based on that. But to your point about print, I think as circulations and things have been affected as people go elsewhere for news or things like that, people have, magazines, newspapers have extended their product offerings to digital. Vogue magazine, they see that as an opportunity where, now people can access, they archive, 30 years of back issues online where people can access that via their tablet, where you just have so much inventory and quality images. So it's really changing the way people are engaging with not only traditional print vehicles, but certainly he's absolutely right that there are magazines that are shifting that way and then actually do account for a majority of their advertising revenue.
We are owned by Advanced Publications, which is very heavily into magazines. They run the New Yorker, Condé Nast, Sporting News, and they're the ones that are making these predictions on the digital revenue that those lines are going to cross, and probably in about 3 or 4 years.
So
And
just
then-
based on where the audience goes, see, we just have to wait for all the digital immigrants to die off and then we'll all be digital, right?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Our typical reader is me. You know, I'm 56 years old. I don't make as much as our typical reader. That's where it differs. But I'm white. I'm well educated. You know, on and on and on. Blah blah blah. That's our typical reader, and our typical reader likes to read print. So I plan on being around another 30 or 40 years. And, you know, our typical reader will be around another 30 or 40 years. And they'll have money. I might not, but our typical reader will. They'll have money to buy a print. So print's not going away anytime soon. But in order to capture, you know, these folks here, you know, we'd be dead in a matter of years if we weren't heavily investing in a lot of energy into our digital products.
Think about for a minute everything you have on this device. Okay, so if I stacked a dictionary, an encyclopedia, a digital camera, right, a phone book, okay, and I'm just getting warmed up, right, a calendar, binoculars, a flashlight, okay, I mean, again, just getting warmed up. You could fill this room potentially with all the things that we have on these smartphones, okay? That's number one. Number two, I would say, think of all the options you have in your car, okay? I mean, if I want to hear about the Florida Gators, I can do that from my smartphone through Bluetooth or through satellite radio or whatever. But I've got audiobooks on here. My Kindle will read a book to me if I wanted to. This will read my email to me. You know, I've got CDs in my car, I think, you know. You know, I can FaceTime through my screen on my GPS with my kids so they can see me and what I'm doing, and I can, you know, hopefully look at the road instead of at them. But there's just so many things you can do in your car that, you know, Pandora is something that I'll listen to, especially on road trips. But if, you know, and I'm not even scratching the surface of all the things that are available to you in your car. And, you know, of course you want to do so safely, but, you know, it's incredible how we're connected in diversity. And we thought in the 80s there was this thing called information overload, and now I think we have information overload and entertainment overload. You know, it's where I really think that's going to drive the cars of the future that will drive you so that you can be entertained the whole time you're sitting there.
Does anybody spend 12 hours a day on consuming media in this room? I'm always...
Yeah, exactly.
I guess so. I'm always flabbergasted by numbers like that. I remember when I was a kid, people would say, well, you know, average American watches 8 or 9 hours of television a day. It's like, really? But I guess they mean television is in the background somewhere.
What's really cool about social media right now is that we can get text messages on our phone of breaking news. I do all the time. And so, you know, you don't even have to be waiting for it to happen. It comes to you now.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool because typically I'm the most informed person in the room wherever I am. You know what I mean? And, you know, I remember when Michael Jackson died, I was at my son's baseball game and I got a text message that said he was hospitalized. Then I got a text message saying he was dead. Well, and with no disrespect to that situation, but the ladies in front of me, right, that were there, that they're watching their sons, you know, after I already knew he was dead, I heard them go, oh, I just got a call, you know, Michael Jackson's hospitalized, it sounds bad. And I'm 3 rows back thinking, you know, he's dead, but I'm not going to be the one to tell them, you know what I mean? And, but this is also true, I was in the Apple store when Steve Jobs died. And I knew that was going to be a mess, so I left, you know, I got out of there quick. But, you know, I could tell nobody else in there knew yet. But when I walked by later on that night, you know, you could tell there were people very distraught about it. And so it's just amazing the power, like you said, you don't know you're consuming the media because I'm not, but it's coming to me and at all hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
John, I'd like to follow up on something you said earlier about the wall between the advertising department and the news department getting lower. Do you see any danger in that?
Yes, I do, but I think there is enough institutional knowledge in newsrooms to know where that line is. It's no longer an iron curtain where there's just no communication at all. But it is a collaborative atmosphere, but I feel like I know where the line is. Is it a slippery? Is it a slippery slope? Is that what you're asking me?
In a sense, yeah.
It certainly could be and would be to somebody who comes into the business after me, who didn't grow up in the atmosphere that I grew up in the business, that is, of, just strict separation of church and state. Yeah, it could be. But I had that drilled into me. Believe me. So it could be, because I don't think people coming into the business now have the same awareness of the quote-unquote danger of that.
So how do we guard against it in your newsroom and in our classrooms?
Ethics. You got to teach ethics.
Yeah.
Ethics are the other thing I would add that's missing from the curriculum today. In the 80s we got away, in the 70s we got away from ethics. In the 80s we brought it back. In the 90s it kind of got budget cut. And I think it's remained budget cut. But it scares me, John, the wall. And I'm in the PR business. I think it's there. I think it's real. Anecdotally, I will tell you that I might take someone on my staff might take a reporter to lunch, and they won't let us pick up the bill, but just the day before, their editor sure did, and I think that's the wrong message, that's just very minor. I think getting a $10 lunch is not a big deal and doesn't buy news, in any economy, but I think it's an example of there's hypocrisy a little bit and exemptions. But I think it's something that must exist, John. I think reporters, as we talked about earlier, have to be smarter and know what's going to move the needle of interest. I mean, it's in a reporter's best interest to get a lot of comments, a lot of page views, and all these things, which Michael Clinton, I think, does a good job at the Business Journal of watching for. And then linking back to old stories and all that. I think that's all important. But you've got to be smarter, and you've got to have a higher standard of ethics, and it does have to be taught, John, I think, on a regular basis. And we try to talk about ethics weekly at our office, because even in the PR business, we have media outlets offering us advertorial, or there's media outlets that you think all the content in there is objective news content, but it's really driven by advertising. Their clients will get written about if they advertise in it. And that to me means it's a less credible publication. I now don't trust a lot of what I see in it. I think that happens with smaller news outlets, but I've seen some bigger ones get into that arena as well, where they try to disguise advertorial to look more like editorial. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a slippery slope. It concerns me. But I also studied journalism, and my background is in journalism, so.
It's a slippery slope. I don't. Like I said before, you'd have to be deaf and dumb and blind not to have seen what's going on in journalism in the last 5 years or 10 years, and not realize, have it, hit over the head with it, that we have to build audience. It's not just about there used to be a kind of a feed them their peas type of mentality to, for the record journalism. They may not want to hear the ins and outs of what happened in city council or Congress or whatever, but by God, they're going to get told, because that's our civic duty to do it. And you see less of that now. You do see more of a, hey, if people are interested in this, let's give them more of this. That might be more of a danger if you're a strict fundamental, journalist.
I was meeting with the TU and they were telling me how their research shows that their readers want to hear more about sports than they do the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, that was before the season got bad, right, or even before last season. And I don't remember the last time I heard a reporter or an editor tell me what they hear the readers want to hear more of, and that they're planning to use that data. Now, unfortunately for the TU, that data is like 2 years old now, and they're just now trying to respond to it. I think a year it took to capture the data, and a year it's taking them to figure out, I guess we got to do something with it. But,
But you know, that data's there every day.
Yeah,
If
on
you
the
look,
web.
if you look at who's, what on your web is hot and what's not.
Yeah, but they hired a company to do the research. But my point is more that, that was a shocker to them that business news is important, and you see their business product has gotten smaller and smaller and less significant. I don't even read it anymore, to be honest with you. But it's an insight into, the audience is in more control, I think, now than ever, and can direct a lot of that initiative and change the philosophy. In the newsroom.
I worked at the Times Union for 20 years, and I still got a lot of friends over there, but their reaction to business news is the same reaction of the industry to business news, which is, on the totem pole of what we like to do, it's at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of newspapers have paid the price, and our chain, we have 40 business journals around the country. We've benefited greatly from that.
Yep.
The fact that newspapers have pretty much gone away from reporting business news. Our print subscription has never been higher. I mean, we're in an all-time high, and there's not many newspapers who can say that. But a lot of it, I like to think that some of it has to do with, the quality of what we're doing, but a good percentage of it has to do with the fact that if you want business news, you ain't going to get it in the Times Union, by and large. Not local business news, anyway.
Right.
We have an electronic slate in the middle of the newsroom, and it shows the popularity of every story we have on our web.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, guess what's always at the top? Some kind of
Tim
crime
Tebow.
related. No, it's some crime. It's the woman who hoarded the dogs in Nassau County. It's just, you usually can predict what they like more, but they may say they want a certain kind of story, the education, the environmental, but those crime stories always are the ones that they're reading and looking at.
And isn't there an element to journalism, and you answer this, please, as the journalist in the room, but isn't there an element of journalist of being like Steve Jobs and saying, it's not what the market's asking for, it's what I can bring to the market that they don't know that they need to know or want to know or, begin using. I mean, I don't know if anybody said I need a tablet so I don't have to carry a laptop around with me, right? And I think, that's what real innovation is, and I think journalism can really lead that conversation in the community of where people's, values and concerns should be. I mean, I never suggested that we should look at, the financials of FSCJ and see how they're managed, but good reporting found that, and it became a top story. So.
You have flexibility,
sure,
all these
absolutely.
hours we're doing, and most of you aren't watching, even at night from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. So at 5 p.m. yesterday, if we're leading with, let's say, the budget and the reaction and the furloughs, maybe at 5:30 we're doing something a little bit different. So it's hard because no one's going to be watching everything we do, but we do try to do a little bit of, what is important. The furlough story, the healthcare Affordable Act, that's important, but it's just how many people see it all. But we do in 8.5 hours a day, you're going to get some of what you know. We even had our Parker Vision story yesterday, which was a big news story, which was not, I didn't see it in the paper today. A big local company won this multi-million-dollar settlement. I was kind of surprised it wasn't played bigger.
Was it in the paper?
I didn't see it today, unless they had it yesterday.
Wow.
Business part.
Well, that's what I mean. So good for us, bad for them.
Do the students have any other questions?
I have one more. Sorry. Thank you. So when you know now more than ever exactly what readers want or what viewers want, how do you gauge between should we put this story up because it's going to get a lot of hits and it's going to build our revenue, or should we put a story that we think is important and that people need to know about that's not really going to make us as much money? How do you make that decision?
For me?
For anyone, especially the journalists.
Well, we have a morning meeting that I missed today. It's at 9:15, and the reporters give their pitches. And do we need to do a follow-up on the Matthews Bridge, or do we need this? And we just kind of balance it. We're not looking in the news department, will that make us money? We wouldn't know, and none of us, like I said, we're separate. But it's kind of a balance. We say, well, wait a minute, we've got a trial story, we're in Georgia, so maybe we put that there, or we'll put the follow-up on the furlough. We just kind of balance it. Again, it's in the evening with 2 hours of news, so we try to get a little bit of everything. There are some days that it's a definite lead. If the sheriff's going to be announcing the arrest of, a top officer, that's probably the lead on every single channel. But then there's shades of gray every night that every single station leads with something else. So there's not an answer on any given day what the news. The day of the airport, everybody led with the shutdown, but each day we just have conversations. Well, since we have so much crime there, let's do something else here, and we just kind of balance it all each day.
I don't know that we really think about segmenting it in that way, where it's like, okay, we're going to put up a story, got a lot of hits, so that gives us license to put up a really dull, dreary story that we think's important, but nobody will click on. We don't really segment it that way. It's kind of like we probably cover more things that some would find superficial than we would have in the past. But that doesn't mean we ignore, the things that are really have substance. And we, I gotta tell you, we have the luxury of being, and it is a luxury of being a niche publication, so that the people who come to us, they want business intelligence. We know that. They know that. And that's what they're going to get from us primarily. And that makes our job, I think, easier vis-a-vis, running the Times Union website or trying to publish the Times Union. It's just trying to be everything to everyone and failing at pretty much all of it.
Can I just follow up on your comment? I mean, you said you don't know what makes money, but you sure do pay attention to how many hits are on the website and
Sure.
on the ratings, and isn't that the same thing?
But if we're doing a crime story on, if our lead yesterday was, let's say we got the ratings, we won at 5 p.m. Our lead was that the Matthews Bridge, or the Hart Bridge was going to change directions. I mean, I don't know, we won that day, but it wasn't because, we're covering the Hart Bridge, we're just covering the news, so.
I think it's so much a part of the environment that you can't help but be influenced by, because I can remember when we first started paying attention to overnights and we would break up the newscast and say, we had more viewers at this point and fewer viewers at this point, maybe we need to change the way we segment the news. I don't know how you can just say that you're not influenced by things like that, because the wall that Mr. Burr referred to is really non-existent. I mean, truthfully, this is dinosaur years, okay? When I first started in the television news business in '72, it was a main job duty of the news director to shield the newsroom from any and all outside influences, and I don't think that's the case now. I remember when I was at Channel 12 and a producer who produced the morning show was called into the general manager's office, and she put a little statue of a cow there, and she said, "What is that?" And she said, "That's a cash cow. Our Good Morning America," or whatever it was at the time, or Good Morning Jacksonville, is a cash cow. She's talking directly to the producer about money. And that was probably 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. I just can't believe that it's not more so now.
Marcia, come to our morning meeting and you'll go, wow, they're just trying to make interesting news. I mean, I'm telling you, our producers and Rob, you don't know who the salespeople are. I just don't feel like we're influenced. If you think this is a shade of gray, let's say, and this is true, 2 years ago I'm on the morning show. I know that the biggest day that plumbers have to come out is the day after Thanksgiving, because everybody, I guess, puts their grease and their junk down the drain. So I was looking for a plumber to do some interactive thing. I did go to the sales people. I said, "You guys know of somebody who'd be good on TV?" do you have a client? If they said no, then I would have looked in the phone book. Did I cross the line? I don't know, but I just thought maybe they had a contact. But it wasn't like they came down and go, hey, we'd like you to put a plumber on our show.
Right.
That wasn't the case.
Right, and I'm not saying that it's that overt. I'm saying it's more covert. It's not, and the word covert is not the right word I'm looking for, but it's part of the culture. This feeling about ratings and how many hits you get on your website is part of, so it's seeped into the newsroom culture so much so that you don't think that you're influenced, but it's part of the conversation.
And it's probably, I think it is much more of an issue in print newsrooms where for years and years we had no feedback on, and then all of a sudden this thing, the internet comes along and people start counting page views, and now all of a sudden we're getting all this real-time feedback on what people are reading and what they're not. And, that was a huge shock. I don't think anybody can say it doesn't affect, how you do your job. Of course it does. But, you still have to, and like I say, in my shop, I think it's easier for me because I know we have a very serious audience, and they're coming to us for some, they're not coming to us for sports and entertainment and lifestyle. They're coming to us, tell me something that I can use to make my business run better or beat my competitor with. So that's a huge advantage for me, but I would think in a more mass media newsroom, it would. I am influenced. I would think in a mass media newsroom, it would be even more influenced than I am.
It's kind of like that movie Minority Report. You guys keep talking about billboards that know you're coming by and they put a special ad up and everything. I just think the messages are all around us, and that for us to say that we are not influenced by them, is not acknowledging the fact that they're all around us.
I think maybe one example of what Marcia is saying is that I've sat in all sorts of morning meetings, and one of the questions always was, who would care about that? Nobody wants to see that story, let's do something else. So in a sense, that is trying to gauge the audience. Because if we run that story, they're going to turn the channel and watch Marcia.
Well, I was kind of shocked a few years ago, and maybe I wouldn't be so shocked today, but I was sitting on one of these panels, and somebody from WOKV was talking about our audience, and we're not going to cover the Duval County School Board. That's of no interest to our audience. And it's like, oh really? Well, that's interesting. I kind of think what goes on in the local public schools is kind of your duty as a journalist, if you're reporting for a big audience, to go cover it. And but no, it was politically, it was felt that that's not something our audience is interested in. So screw it.
All right, well, this has been great. Let's give a big round of applause to Angela.
Didn't mean to end with those words. I'm sorry.
Our next, our next item is